Most fossils are not dramatic. They are quiet, fragmented, incomplete. A tooth in a rock, a shell pressed flat into stone, a bone separated from its body and carried far from where the animal once lived. The majority of life that has ever existed left behind nothing more than scattered traces. After death, nature normally dismantles everything. Scavengers tear apart flesh within hours. Bacteria dissolve soft tissue. Weather cracks bone. Water carries pieces away. Within weeks or months, the organism is erased. Fossilization is supposed to be slow and imperfect because death itself is slow and imperfect. But sometimes something interrupts that process. Sometimes death is so sudden, so violent, that decay never begins. Instead of a skeleton, we get a moment, a frozen action, a record not of what the animal was, but of what it was doing when the world abruptly ended around it. These are the rarest fossils on Earth. Not remains, not relics. They are accidents captured in geological memory. To understand why they exist, we have to understand the enemy of fossilization, time. When an organism dies under normal conditions, its body becomes part of the ecosystem immediately. Insects arrive first. Within minutes, they begin laying eggs. Microbes break down tissues from the inside. Oxygen allows chemical reactions to dismantle proteins and fats. Even bone is porous, filled with living cells that collapse and fracture after death. For a fossil to form, the body must be protected from all of this. Air must be removed, water flow must stop, scavengers must be prevented, bacteria must be slowed or suffocated. And that can only happen if the environment changes faster than decomposition can begin. The key factor is speed. If burial happens in hours instead of days, the body remains intact. If burial happens in minutes, posture is preserved. If burial happens in seconds, behavior is preserved. At that point, geology stops being a background process and becomes a weapon. Imagine an animal walking across a riverbank. The ground beneath it suddenly collapses, liquefied sediment swallowing its legs. The animal struggles, muscles contracting in panic. Before it can escape, another wave of sediment pours over it, sealing its mouth and lungs. Within moments, the body is encased in dense mud, oxygen cut off completely. No scavenger can reach it, no current can move it, no decay can progress. The last movement of its limbs remains locked in place. Millions of years later, stone preserves the struggle. This is why violent death creates perfect fossils, not because violence preserves, but because violence isolates. Catastrophe separates the body from the biological world and hands it to the geological one instantly. Paleontologists call these event deposits. Layers formed not over centuries, but in moments. Each one is a page in the history of disasters that struck ancient ecosystems without warning. And sometimes those pages are disturbingly detailed. There are fossils of fish with smaller fish still in their throats, predators caught mid-bite, wings spread in attempted escape, herd animals oriented in the same direction, all fleeing something that reached them anyway. These are not reconstructed behaviors. They are not scientific guesses. They are eyewitness records written in stone. One of the earliest clues that such preservation existed came from trackways. Normally, footprints fade within days. Wind erases them, rain dissolves them. Other animals step over them. Yet certain ancient rock layers contain hundreds of footprints that end abruptly in the same place, as if the ground itself swallowed the walkers. The animals did not wander away. They stopped existing. Above the tracks lies a layer of dense sediment, deposited all at once. The final steps remain sharp, edges unblurred, toes visible, pressure marks still intact. That level of detail means the surface hardened almost immediately after being formed, which means whatever buried them happened faster than the animals could react. In some sites, entire groups are preserved together. A predator approaching from behind, prey accelerating forward, the distance between steps increasing as speed increases, and then silence. A wall of earth overtook them. The remarkable thing is not just that they died, but that their last seconds were recorded so precisely that modern scientists can calculate their running speed from stride length. We can measure panic from spacing. Geology captured fear. This challenges the popular image of fossils as calm, static skeletons arranged neatly by time. The reality is much more violent. The fossil record is biased toward catastrophe. The peaceful deaths rarely survive long enough to become stone. Calm ecosystems disappear. Disasters remain. This also explains why certain time periods appear crowded with fossils while others seem empty. Life did not suddenly flourish more in those intervals. Instead, those intervals experienced events capable of instantaneous burial. Nature briefly switched from recycler to archivist. Another detail appears in exceptional preservation: articulation. Normally, after death, joints loosen as connective tissues decay. Bones separate quickly. Even a buried carcass eventually collapses inward, leaving a scattered arrangement. But in rapid burial sites, skeletons remain fully connected. Fingers curled, necks bent, tails curved naturally. The body did not have time to fall apart. In some specimens, muscles leave impressions. Skin texture survives. Even the outline of the eye remains visible as a depression in the rock. Such preservation requires not just quick burial, but burial before the body relaxes after death. The organism died where it stands, and the environment hardened around it before gravity could complete its work. There is a moment after death when the body still holds its last posture. Normally, that moment lasts minutes before collapse begins. Violent fossilization traps exactly that instant, which is why many of these fossils look almost uncomfortable to observe. They are not bones arranged by time. They are bodies interrupted mid-motion. And the causes are varied: collapsing riverbanks, submarine sediment avalanches, sudden storms carrying dense silt, entire lakes overturning their bottom layers upward. Even shock waves from distant impacts, triggering landslides far from the original disaster. Each mechanism shares one requirement: speed exceeding reaction. The animal never understood what was happening. This first category of perfect preservation teaches us an important rule about ancient life. We do not merely study organisms that lived long ago, we often study organisms that died suddenly. Their fossils are not snapshots of normal existence, they are snapshots of catastrophe. And because catastrophe is rare but decisive, each one becomes disproportionately represented in the rock record. A single hour of disaster can leave more fossils than 10,000 years of peaceful living. So when we examine certain layers and find dozens of animals together, we are not looking at a thriving habitat. We are looking at a moment when an entire community vanished at once. Time stopped for them, and the planet remembered. There is a subtle detail paleontologists learn early in their training. Bones do not tell stories by themselves. Arrangement tells the story. A skeleton lying flat with scattered ribs suggests decay before burial. A skull separated from the spine suggests transport by water. But a body locked in tension, limbs pulled inward or extended sharply, tells something very different. It means the muscles were still active when burial occurred. In many violent fossil sites, animals are preserved in what scientists call a death pose. The back arches, the neck bends sharply backward, the tail stiffens, and the jaws open. At first, early researchers believed this posture was simply how ancient animals lived or rested. But modern understanding reveals it is neurological. It happens when the brain loses oxygen abruptly, when the nervous system collapses under extreme stress. Muscles contract uncontrollably and freeze into position. The body does not relax because the chemical signals that release muscle tension never complete their cycle. Burial occurs before decomposition can soften the tissues. This means the fossil records not just death, but the instant of dying. In certain quarries, nearly every skeleton displays this identical posture. Hundreds of animals, unrelated species, preserved with necks bent back and limbs drawn inward. That uniformity reveals something critical. They did not die gradually, they died within moments of each other. A slow disaster creates scattered remains across layers. A sudden disaster creates a single page in stone. One famous site revealed dozens of fish, all facing the same direction, their fins extended as if pushing through water. Some had their mouths open, gills expanded wide. They were not resting on the bottom. They were swimming. Then the sediment arrived. Microscopic analysis of the surrounding rock shows grains so fine they could only have settled in dense suspension, not drifting slowly, but collapsing out of water in a heavy plume. The fish inhaled the particles directly into their gills. Within seconds, breathing stopped, the bodies sank, and the same sediment sealed them completely. The final movement of swimming was preserved. Elsewhere, insects appear mid-flight, wings fully extended. Normally, an insect that lands on water breaks surface tension and sinks irregularly. But these are held upright. legs angled as if still airborne. The explanation is sudden ashfall or dust, so dense it functioned almost like a liquid surface, supporting them long enough for burial to occur before collapse. Flight was interrupted in the air. Sometimes the details are even more intimate. There are fossils of reptiles caught with their heads turned sharply toward a predator behind them. The distance between the attacker and the prey is measurable. From stride length and limb extension, scientists can estimate the speed of the chase. Both animals were running. Neither finished the race. Above them lies a massive deposit of sediment consistent with a sudden slope failure. The hillside itself moved faster than either animal. This kind of evidence forces a different perspective on the fossil record. It is not simply a catalogue of species, it is a catalogue of events. Every exceptional fossil layer corresponds to a moment when the environment shifted violently enough to bypass biology. Normal death belongs to ecology. Instant death belongs to geology. The difference between the two is preservation. There are also trackways that change character abruptly. Calm walking steps suddenly deepen, spacing widens, and claw marks appear where none existed before. The animal began to run. Within a few more prints, the tracks vanish beneath a layer deposited all at once. No turning marks, no slowing pattern. The animal did not escape the area. The surface it stood on ceased to exist. This is especially revealing in shoreline deposits. Herd animals approach water at relaxed pace, their footprints overlapping casually. Then all tracks orient in the same direction, stride length doubling. Panic spreads through the group. Yet they run only a short distance before the sediment layer covers the entire surface. Something advanced faster than a herd could sprint. Because the burial was immediate, even the impressions of skin pads and toe scales remained crisp. Those delicate textures normally erode within hours. Their survival indicates the time between footprint and burial was measured in minutes. We are seeing the beginning of a disaster, not its aftermath. In a few rare cases, paleontologists have discovered animals preserved vertically, bodies oriented head upward, tails downward, limbs braced against surrounding sediment. The creatures appear as though they attempted to climb through the material engulfing them. This is not a position gravity would create after death. It is a position created during suffocation. The animal struggled inside the sediment as it hardened around it. Even more unsettling are fossils showing interaction at the exact instant of interruption. A predator's teeth embedded in prey bone, not yet released. A fish halfway swallowed by another fish, tail protruding from the mouth. These are not feeding traces left after death. They are meals halted mid-act. In ordinary conditions, both bodies would separate as decomposition began. Instead, they remain locked together because neither survived long enough for the process to start. Such fossils compress time to almost nothing. The sequence of behavior, reaction, and death collapses into a single geological frame. When viewed across multiple sites worldwide, a pattern emerges. Perfect preservation is rarely gentle. It is nearly always violent, sudden, and overwhelming. The environments capable of stopping decay are the same environments capable of stopping life instantly. Mudflows behave like liquid concrete. Ash behaves like suffocating snow. Water becomes a dense slurry that fills lungs before drowning even begins. The animals never experience prolonged suffering. They experience interruption. This distinction matters because it explains why the fossil record is not evenly distributed. Most living creatures die quietly and disappear. A few die catastrophically and become permanent. We remember the exceptions. Chapter by chapter in Earth's history, layers mark moments when the balance tipped briefly away from biology's recycling system and toward geology's storage system. During those moments, the world acted not as an ecosystem, but as a recording device. The stone does not just contain bodies. It contains the final second before silence. The next chapters will show the specific mechanisms behind these interruptions. Different disasters leave different signatures. Some suffocate, some freeze, some drown. Some trap victims in substances that harden around them molecule by molecule. But they all share one trait. They happen faster than life can respond. And when that happens, death stops being an end and becomes a preserved event, waiting millions of years for someone to read it. Among all natural forces that kill living creatures, few are as quiet as moving ground. There is no warning sound in many cases, no visible predator, no dramatic change in the sky. The surface beneath an animal simply changes state, shifting from solid to fluid faster than instinct can react. To the creature, the world itself becomes unstable. In the fossil record, this type of death appears repeatedly. Entire groups preserved in one position, bodies oriented normally, as if they had been standing on safe terrain seconds earlier. There are no bite marks, no burn traces, no long transport by water, just animals surrounded by sediment identical to the ground they once walked on. They were not washed in, they were swallowed. Sediment can behave in unexpected ways. Under certain conditions, water saturates fine particles until friction between grains collapses. The ground loses strength and flows like thick liquid. Modern geologists call this liquefaction. During earthquakes, riverbank failures, or heavy storms, vast sections of land can suddenly move downhill as a dense slurry. To an animal, it is indistinguishable from stepping onto solid soil until the first leg sinks. Once trapped, escape becomes nearly impossible. Each movement pushes the body deeper, drawing more sediment inward. The material flows around limbs, filling gaps instantly. Breathing becomes difficult as particles clog airways. Within minutes, the animal is immobilized and suffocating. If the flow continues, more layers accumulate on top, sealing the body from oxygen completely. This sequence is ideal for fossilization. One ancient lake deposit preserves dozens of large herbivores standing upright. Their legs penetrate deeply into the surrounding rock layer while their upper bodies remain vertical. The animals appear frozen mid-step, heads angled slightly upward. They were not lying down. They were trying to pull themselves free. Microscopic analysis shows the sediment settled in pulses, wave after wave. The first surge trapped their feet, the next buried their bodies, the final layers covered their heads. None of them escaped. The remarkable feature is the lack of scavenging marks. Normally, a carcass attracts predators and decomposes rapidly. Here, the burial was so immediate that the ecosystem never interacted with the bodies again. The earth isolated them in minutes. Another site contained smaller animals clustered near what used to be a river margin. Their footprints approached the bank casually. Then the impressions deepen abruptly. Claw scratches appear behind them, indicating backward pulling. A few bodies lie partially twisted, necks extended. The bank collapsed beneath them. Sediment from above flowed into the water and over the shoreline simultaneously, engulfing both land and shallow aquatic habitat in a single movement. Fish within the shallows were buried alongside land animals, preserved together though they never shared the same space during life. The disaster erased the boundary between environments. In certain desert deposits, entire burrowing animals are preserved inside their tunnels. At first, this seems ordinary, but the surrounding sediment reveals a sudden influx of fine material, filling the burrows faster than the inhabitants could dig upward. Their claws are positioned against the roof of the tunnel, bodies angled toward the surface. They were attempting to escape rising sediment. Because the tunnels filled from above and behind simultaneously, the animals could not orient correctly. Disoriented and suffocated, they remained exactly where they struggled. The burrow itself became their coffin and their fossil mold. The earth captured not just the body but the behavior. These events also explain a long-standing mystery in paleontology: why some fossil assemblages contain many individuals of the same species, same age group, and same orientation. A predator or drought would produce scattered remains across time. A sudden ground failure produces a single demographic snapshot. In one famous layer, dozens of young animals are found together, all facing upslope. Their limb positions indicate running. Their sizes suggest a herd moving as a unit. Above them lies a thick deposit of debris, consistent with hillside collapse triggered by intense rainfall. They were outrunning something slower than themselves, but faster than the terrain. The slope did not fall in a single block. It liquefied and flowed, carrying mud and stones at speeds comparable to a sprinting animal. No matter how fast they ran, the ground advanced faster. The final positions of the bodies form a line that curves along the ancient topography. From that line, researchers can reconstruct the direction of movement and the path of the flow. It is a geological crime scene recorded in detail. Sometimes the victims include predators. In one deposit, carnivores are found beside prey animals without bite marks or signs of feeding. Both were caught in the same event. The ground made no distinction between hunter and hunted. Violent burial equalizes ecosystems instantly. The effectiveness of sediment burial comes from exclusion of oxygen. Bacteria responsible for decay require air or dissolved oxygen in water. When compacted mud surrounds a body tightly, microbial activity slows dramatically. Chemical reactions halt before tissues collapse. Minerals infiltrate slowly over thousands of years, replacing organic material while maintaining structure. But the preservation begins in the first minutes when decay fails to start. Even delicate structures can survive. In some cases, impressions of skin wrinkles appear around joints where the animal strained. Muscle outlines remain visible because the tissues did not have time to relax or decompose. The rock records pressure and tension as if the body was still resisting. These fossils do not represent peaceful death. They represent interruption mid-effort. Geologists often recognize these deposits by graded layering. Coarser particles settle first, followed by fine silt, then clay. This pattern indicates rapid suspension, settling from a dense flow. The body lies within that sequence, exactly where it became trapped, not transported afterward. Position equals moment. The same principle occurs underwater. Submarine landslides move massive volumes of sediment along the ocean floor. Creatures living there experience an advancing wall of dense particles thicker than water and carrying little oxygen. Fish cannot swim through it effectively. Invertebrates cannot burrow upward fast enough. They are engulfed while alive. Unlike surface landslides, these leave nearly undisturbed postures because buoyancy reduces collapse. Animals appear to rest naturally, yet their gills contain sediment grains, proving suffocation occurred before burial completed. Again, death and preservation coincide. These events happen rarely in any single location, but across geological time they occur everywhere. Each instance creates a layer richer in fossils than thousands of surrounding layers combined. Life continues normally most days. Then, for a few minutes, the Earth becomes fluid. Those minutes are what we find millions of years later. Not all ground failures happen on slopes. Some happen beneath water, where the boundary between liquid and solid is already uncertain. Lakes and shallow seas often accumulate fine sediment, layer by layer, building delicate stacks that appear stable but are only barely balanced. A small disturbance can cause the entire structure to collapse. When it does, the lake floor does not crack. It flows. Ancient lake deposits preserve some of the most unsettling fossils ever discovered because they record this kind of failure in extraordinary detail. In several formations, fish are preserved in dense groups, oriented randomly but positioned at multiple heights within a single sediment layer. Some appear to swim upward, others sideways, others angle downward as though tumbling. They were caught inside moving ground, suspended in water. The sediment surged upward in a thick cloud, filling the water column rapidly. Unlike normal muddy water, this cloud carried enough density to clog gills immediately. The fish did not sink to the bottom afterward. The bottom rose around them. A lake became a solid in minutes. Because the event occurred underwater, Bodies did not collapse under their own weight. Fins remained spread, mouths open wide. Some individuals still contain sediment packed deep into their respiratory passages. Analysis shows particles penetrated while circulation was still active, meaning they were breathing when engulfed. The preservation captures the instant of suffocation. In a different environment, coastal flats reveal another variation. These shallow tidal areas look harmless, covered by thin films of water over soft ground. Animals walk across them routinely. But beneath lies water-saturated sediment held together only by surface tension. If a heavier layer suddenly slides in from offshore, pressure liquefies the substrate instantly. The surface loses strength everywhere at once. Trackways preserved in these zones show calm walking patterns that abruptly transform. Steps deepen sharply, toes spread outward for traction, and tail marks appear where bodies dragged for balance. Within a few meters, footprints end beneath a uniform blanket of fine sediment. The animals did not leave the area. They sank and were buried simultaneously as the substrate collapsed under a new load. The final layer sealed the surface before waves could erase the marks. The ground functioned like a trapdoor across an entire landscape. This explains why certain fossil beds contain animals of different habitats in direct association. Shore walkers, swimmers, and bottom dwellers appear together in a single horizon. They were not transported together over time. They occupied neighboring environments that failed together. The event erased ecological separation in seconds. Even more dramatic are deposits formed near river deltas. Rivers constantly deliver sediment to their mouths, building unstable lobes that extend outward into water. Over time, the weight becomes too great, and the front edge collapses downward. The collapse pulls material from behind, creating a chain reaction that propagates inland. Anything standing on the delta surface is carried downward inside the flow. In several fossil localities, entire groups of animals lie oriented downslope, limbs tucked close to bodies as if bracing against pressure. The surrounding rock contains mixed grain sizes and plant debris torn from upstream areas, indicating powerful, turbulent movement. Yet, the bodies remain intact and articulated. They were transported only a short distance inside a dense slurry that quickly settled and hardened. Because the movement lasted minutes rather than hours, there was no time for impact damage or scavenging. The animals were effectively packaged while still whole. One particular site preserves both adults and juveniles clustered together in a tight formation. Growth ring analysis shows they died during the same season. Their arrangement suggests group behavior, possibly migrating or resting along the river margin when collapse began. The ground beneath them accelerated faster than they could disperse. Mud cracks preserved beneath the layer reveal the surface had been exposed shortly before burial. Within a short time, it was submerged under meters of sediment. The transition from dry land to deep burial occurred faster than weathering could erase surface features. Such evidence highlights a recurring principle in violent fossilization. The environment does not need to destroy bodies to preserve them, it only needs to isolate them immediately. In many cases, injuries are absent. No fractures, no bite marks, no external trauma. Death came from inability to breathe or move, not from physical tearing. The violence lies in speed and scale rather than visible damage. There are also vertical escape structures preserved in certain deposits. Small animals attempted to dig upward as sediment accumulated. Their burrows curve and twist toward the surface, but terminate abruptly where oxygen ran out. The tunnel fills match the surrounding layer perfectly, showing they were created during burial, not afterward. These are literal last efforts captured in rock. On rare occasions, even plants record the same moment. Upright stems penetrate a rapid deposit, leaves still attached, roots anchored in the original soil beneath. The plants did not grow through the layer over time. They were engulfed while alive, frozen in place as sediment accumulated around them. Life continued for seconds after burial began. Across continents and ages, these ground flow events share a consistent signature: uniform orientation, intact articulation, absence of scavenging, and surrounding sediment indicating rapid emplacement. Together they form one of the clearest examples of instantaneous geological recording. The Earth moved faster than biology could respond. When studying these fossils, scientists are not simply reconstructing ancient creatures, they are reconstructing a sequence measured in breaths, the last inhalation clogged with particles. The final step, sinking deeper instead of lifting free. The last coordinated movement replaced by immobility. Burial alive is rarely visible in the skeleton alone, but the context reveals it unmistakably. The rock is not a grave assembled after death. It is the material that caused the death, and once hardened, it preserved the exact second when solid ground became a trap and an ecosystem vanished without warning. If moving earth kills by swallowing, volcanic ash kills by stealing air. Unlike landslides or collapsing riverbanks, ash does not always arrive as a visible wall. Often it begins as a distant sound, a low vibration carried through the ground. Animals may notice it, but do not understand its meaning. The sky still appears normal, the horizon unchanged, then the light fades. Not from sunset, but from a rising column of microscopic rock expanding into the atmosphere. Within minutes, daylight dims to twilight. Within minutes more, darkness arrives in the middle of day. The air fills with particles so fine they float like smoke, yet weigh like sand, and then they begin to fall. To a living creature, volcanic ash is not soft. Each grain is sharp. Jagged glass formed by shattered magma. The particles scrape eyes, coat fur, clog nostrils, and coat lungs. Breathing becomes labor. Every inhalation draws more solid material inside the respiratory system. The animal is not burned, it suffocates. This method of death produces some of the most detailed fossils on Earth because ash behaves differently from normal sediment. Instead of flowing along the ground first, it falls from above uniformly, covering everything at nearly the same moment. It fills spaces between feathers, around scales, and beneath wings without disturbing posture. It buries life exactly where it stands. One ancient volcanic plain preserves insects in flight. Their wings are fully extended, legs angled downward, bodies oriented naturally in air. They are not lying on the ground. The ash layer that holds them was deposited while they were airborne. The density of particles increased so rapidly that they could no longer remain aloft. The air itself became heavy. As the insects lost lift, ash accumulated around them faster than they could fall or struggle. By the time they reached the ground, they were already encased. Flight ended inside a cloud. Bird-like creatures show similar evidence. Feathers remain spread, tails fanned, necks extended forward as if still navigating. Many face the same direction, suggesting they attempted to flee a darkening horizon before collapse. The ash reached them faster than distance could help. Because ash layers settle quickly, but gently, bodies remain articulated. There is no rolling, no transport, no impact damage. The organisms simply stop moving and vanish beneath a blanket that thickens minute by minute. Breathing stops first. In modern volcanic disasters, victims often die from inhalation long before heat arrives. Ancient animals experience the same. Fine particles enter lungs and combine with moisture to form dense paste. Gas exchange fails, muscles weaken. Collapse follows within moments. The fossil record captures that sequence. Fish preserved in volcanic lake deposits contain ash packed into their gills, individual filaments still separated and visible. They were alive when the particles entered. Had they died beforehand, the delicate structures would have decayed or folded before burial. Instead, they remain expanded, locked open in final respiration. The water they swam in turned lethal instantly. Another remarkable feature of ash burial is layering. Volcanic eruptions rarely produce a single fall. They produce pulses. Each pulse adds a thin sheet. Between pulses there may be minutes or hours, but not enough time for scavengers to arrive. The result is bodies entombed within finely stacked laminations, sometimes preserving outlines of skin or fur pressed into successive layers. The rock becomes a negative image of the organism. In certain deposits, mammals lie curled naturally, not in stress posture, but in positions of exhaustion. Ashfall often lasts long enough for animals to weaken gradually. They attempt to rest as breathing becomes difficult. When they can no longer rise, the next layer seals them permanently. Not panic, not struggle, just collapse beneath falling dust. Plants record the same story. Leaves remain attached to branches. Grasses stand upright beneath the layer. Normally, vegetation decays quickly after burial, but ash can dehydrate and protect surfaces before microbial breakdown begins. Even delicate leaf veins imprint perfectly, showing the absence of disturbance. The entire landscape stopped simultaneously. One site preserves a herd moving across open ground. Their trackways lead into the ash layer and continue for a short distance on top of it. The prints become shallower and closer together, indicating weakening movement. Finally, bodies appear a few meters beyond, oriented in different directions. They slowed as breathing failed. Analysis of particle size shows the ash thickened rapidly during their attempt to escape. The animals were not overtaken by heat or lava, they were overtaken by atmosphere becoming solid. Perhaps the most striking aspect of ash preservation is facial detail. Eye sockets retain delicate margins, mouths remain slightly open. In rare cases, the outline of eyelids appears in the surrounding rock. Such preservation requires burial before soft tissues collapse, which means minutes after death at most. The expression becomes permanent. Entire ecosystems can vanish this way. Lakes, forests, plains, and coastlines buried beneath meters of fine volcanic material in a single day. Later erosion reveals them as if a photograph were taken at the exact moment darkness fell. The violence is invisible in the bones. No broken limbs, no predator damage, no sign of impact, only stillness beneath stone that once floated in air. Volcanic ash does not need to move quickly across ground. It only needs to arrive everywhere at once. That is what makes it so effective at preserving life. The world does not shatter. It quietly suffocates under falling sky. Ashfall does not always come alone. The same eruption that sends fine particles into the sky can also unleash dense, ground-hugging clouds moving faster than any animal can run. These are pyroclastic surges, mixtures of hot gas and microscopic debris that roll across landscapes like liquid darkness. Unlike lava, they do not glow. They appear as expanding walls of grey, silent at first, then roaring as they approach. For living creatures, the effect is immediate. Air temperature rises sharply, but often not enough to burn externally. Instead, lungs inhale superheated dust. The moisture lining the respiratory tract flashes to steam, destroying the ability to breathe in a single inhalation. Muscles seize. Collapse follows within seconds. This kind of death leaves a unique fossil signature. Bodies preserved within surge deposits frequently display identical orientation. They lie parallel to the direction of flow, limbs drawn inward, heads lowered as though pushed gently into place. The force of the cloud presses them down while the ash simultaneously buries them. Unlike water currents, which tumble bodies violently, pyroclastic surges immobilize almost instantly. They do not carry organisms far. The density of the cloud supports weight momentarily, then settles. When the particles fall out of suspension, they lock everything exactly where it fell. The difference between a slow burial and a surge burial can be measured in posture. In surge deposits, even delicate structures remain undisturbed. Some animals appear asleep. In several ancient volcanic basins, entire groups lie arranged as if resting. Yet microscopic study reveals ash packed deep inside nasal passages and throats. The calm positions are misleading. The nervous system shut down before panic movements could occur. The body lost coordination instantly. The moment of death preceded the moment of burial by only seconds. One remarkable site preserves reptiles with tongues extended slightly beyond the mouth. This detail is rarely maintained because soft tissue collapses rapidly. Here, fine ash hardened around the tissue before retraction or decay. The position reflects involuntary reflex at respiratory failure. The stone records physiology, not just anatomy. Ash surges also explain the presence of animals inside shelters that should have protected them. Burrows, hollow logs, and rock overhangs contained skeletons facing outward. The creatures retreated to safety but inhaled lethal air that penetrated every opening. Protection from falling debris offered no protection from breathable poison. The entire environment became uninhabitable at once. There are even fossils of aquatic life affected by airborne ash. Lakes receiving heavy fallout experience sudden oxygen depletion as particles clog gills and alter water chemistry. Fish preserved in these layers show expanded gill covers and open mouths, identical to land animals gasping above. Different habitats share the same final reaction. In thick ash sequences, multiple horizons of death appear stacked vertically. Each layer corresponds to a separate eruptive pulse. After the first burial, surviving animals may return cautiously to the quiet landscape, only to be caught by the next fall hours or days later. The rock preserves repeated attempts of life to resume normal activity. Each attempt ends abruptly. Footprints appear between layers, crossing smooth ash surfaces. They wander, circle, then stop beneath the following deposit. The distance between steps decreases with each new layer, suggesting weakened individuals struggling in air still heavy with suspended particles. The environment never fully recovered before the next event arrived. Over time, pressure compresses the ash into fine stone, capable of preserving extraordinary detail. Feather impressions, hair outlines, even the texture of scales become visible, because the particles were small enough to fill microscopic spaces before decay altered them. This is why volcanic deposits often reveal creatures with a lifelike quality unmatched elsewhere in the fossil record. The burial was both gentle and instantaneous. No transport, no disturbance, no scavenging interval. Occasionally, predators are found beside prey without interaction marks. Both died simultaneously as the cloud passed over them. Hunting stopped mid-pursuit, not because the chase ended, but because breathing ended. Ash equalizes all behavior. The psychological impact of studying such fossils is notable among researchers. Unlike scattered bones assembled over years, these remains show scenes, a herd clustered together. Individuals turning toward the same horizon. Solitary animals curled where they collapsed. The pattern is consistent across continents and ages. Volcanic air kills faster than animals can comprehend. There is no gradual escalation of danger detectable by instinct. The senses designed to detect predators or fire offer no preparation for inhaling rock. The sky becomes ground. After burial, rainfall compacts the layers, sealing the organisms from oxygen permanently. Minerals slowly infiltrate cells, replacing structure without altering form. Millions of years later, erosion reveals them as though uncovered minutes after death. A landscape silenced in an afternoon, where moving earth traps from below, ash traps from above. Together they demonstrate a principle repeated throughout geological history. Perfect preservation requires a sudden removal of the biological world. Air, scavengers, and time must be excluded faster than reaction allows. Volcanoes achieve this not by force alone, but by changing the atmosphere itself into a substance that ends movement instantly. Creatures did not see a wall approaching. They breathed their last breath inside a cloud and never took another step. Heat and suffocation can stop life instantly, but cold can do something stranger. It can pause it. In certain rare environments, temperature drops faster than the body can decay. Instead of decomposition, tissues stiffen. Instead of collapse, shape remains. The organism does not dry, rot, or scatter. It simply becomes still, held in the exact position of its final motion. Freezing is unique among preservation processes because it halts chemistry itself. Most fossilization replaces organic material with minerals over long periods. Frozen preservation does not need replacement at first. It prevents destruction. Cells rupture internally as ice crystals form, but externally the structure stays intact. Skin, fur, stomach contents, even the last meal remain recognizable. For paleontologists, these are not typical fossils. They are biological time capsules. The conditions required are extreme: rapid temperature decline, immediate burial in snow or sediment, and continuous cold, preventing thaw cycles. If thawing occurs repeatedly, tissues decay quickly and the moment is lost. Only uninterrupted cold preserves the scene. When it works, it records the final day of an animal's life. In northern deposits, large mammals have been discovered lying on their sides, with legs folded naturally beneath them. Their fur remains patterned, their ears intact. Some still contain partially chewed plants between teeth. These animals did not starve over weeks or wander until collapse. They died quickly enough that digestion had barely progressed. The environment changed faster than metabolism. One specimen preserved so completely that internal organs remained distinguishable, revealed grasses inside the stomach from a warm season. Yet the surrounding sediment indicated sudden freezing conditions. The animal was feeding in mild climate and died within hours as temperature plunged. The season changed in a single day. Freezing can occur when storms trap animals in snow combined with rapid temperature drop. Snow alone insulates and allows survival. But if wet fur freezes solid and air temperature continues falling, movement becomes impossible. Exhaustion follows, then stillness. Continued snowfall buries the body before scavengers locate it. Ice becomes both cause and protector. Unlike ash or mud, frozen burial does not always distort posture. Muscles contract during cold stress, often curling the body slightly inward to conserve heat. Many preserved animals display this relaxed protective position rather than panic extension. They appear resting, not struggling. The detail extends to facial features. Lips remain closed, eyelids partially lowered. These expressions are not peaceful deaths, but the absence of decomposition. The body froze before muscles relaxed after death. Sometimes multiple individuals are found together, oriented into the wind. They had grouped for warmth. When temperature dropped beyond tolerance, the entire cluster collapsed nearly simultaneously. Snow covered them and later hardened into permafrost. The herd became permanent. Freezing also preserves smaller life. Birds discovered within ice deposits retain feather layering, and microscopic analysis reveals pigmentation patterns. Even delicate wing membranes remain stretched between bones, something impossible in normal fossilization. Their last flight ended in cold air thick enough to immobilize. Water bodies provide another mechanism. If animals break through thin ice and cannot climb out, soaked fur accelerates heat loss dramatically. In extreme cold, the surrounding water freezes around the body before scavengers disturb it. Sediment later covers the frozen form. They remain exactly where they sank. In some sites, predators lie beside prey without signs of feeding. The chase likely drove both onto unstable ice. Both entered freezing water. Neither escaped. Because freezing followed rapidly, the scene remained intact. Behavior frozen along with bodies. Perhaps the most revealing evidence comes from stomach contents. In several preserved animals, undigested plants remain fresh enough to identify species and growth stage. This allows reconstruction of the season and even time of day when feeding occurred. The interval between eating and death was short. Normal fossilization rarely retains this information because decay destroys soft tissue rapidly. Freezing removes that process entirely. Instead of bones telling us what an animal was, tissues tell us what it was doing hours before dying. Weather becomes the killer. In geological terms, these deposits correspond to sudden climate events, rapid cold snaps, blizzards following warm periods, or environmental shifts caused by altered ocean currents. The animals were adapted to cold, but not to instant cold. Their physiology expected gradual change. What makes frozen preservation unsettling is its familiarity. The bodies look recent. Fur still lies in natural direction. Skin does not shrink against bone. Without context, they appear sleeping rather than ancient. Time feels broken around them, yet they are as old as stone fossils, sometimes older. The difference is that chemistry paused before erasure began. Later mineral infiltration may occur, but the initial preservation captured the last moment before decay. Cold turned death into suspension. In these cases, the environment did not crush or suffocate immediately. It removed the ability to continue living while maintaining structure perfectly. The animal's final posture was not shaped by burial pressure, but by its own muscles at the instant of collapse. The last winter did not last a season. It lasted forever. Freezing does more than preserve appearance. It preserves sequence. When a body decays normally, events blur together. Muscles relax, tissues shrink, organs collapse, and scavengers rearrange everything before burial ever begins. But in deep cold, the order of the final minutes remains visible because each stage stopped before the next could start. Researchers examining frozen remains often reconstruct the exact progression of death. In several cases, the hind legs remain tucked beneath the body while the front legs extend slightly forward. This is not random. It reflects the moment the animal attempted to rise after resting in snow, but lacked strength due to hypothermia. The muscles stiffened before a full step could be taken. The effort began and never finished. Some specimens show broken branches beneath their bodies without feeding damage above. The animal collapsed while walking through vegetation, not after lying down. Others have snow compressed beneath their torso, indicating they were standing when they weakened and sank gradually into accumulating drifts. Cold does not always kill instantly. Unlike ash or suffocating sediment, freezing often allows a short period of confusion and slowing reflexes. The nervous system becomes less responsive. Movements grow clumsy. Orientation fails. Animals may circle or lie down despite danger because conserving energy feels instinctively correct. The fossil records this behavior clearly. In certain preserved herds, individuals lie only a few body lengths apart, all facing different directions. They did not flee a single point of threat. They wandered until coordination failed. Snow then covered them unevenly, but freezing locked each posture in place before collapse of surrounding material. The landscape became silent gradually, yet the preservation was immediate once stillness came. The most revealing evidence appears in the respiratory passages. Ice formed while airways still contained moisture from breathing. The pattern of freezing indicates inhalation at the moment circulation stopped. Had the animals died first and frozen later, the distribution would differ. They froze while alive. This distinction explains why some bodies remain exceptionally complete. Scavengers rarely disturb frozen carcasses immediately because scent disperses poorly in extreme cold, and the bodies remain inaccessible beneath snow. By the time seasonal thaw might expose them, additional sediment or ice layers often cover them permanently. Nature delays decay long enough for geology to take over. There are also examples of animals preserved mid-interaction. A predator's jaws remain closed around prey fur, yet teeth did not penetrate deeply. Both likely weakened simultaneously during exposure. Neither completed the act. The moment of behavior exists without conclusion. Time paused before outcome. Another striking feature is preservation of internal chemistry. Fat deposits remain in original distribution, revealing nutritional condition. Some individuals show thick reserves, meaning they were healthy before the sudden cold. Others show depletion, suggesting late seasonal vulnerability. These details show that catastrophic freezing can strike both prepared and unprepared animals equally. Survival depended on location, not strength. Small creatures show even clearer moments. Rodents preserved inside burrows sometimes appear curled tightly with noses tucked beneath tails, the natural sleeping posture used to conserve heat. Yet the burrow entrance above them filled with ice before they could emerge. The shelter became a trap rather than protection. Even behavior designed for survival failed. Occasionally, stomach contents contained not just plant matter, but also water that froze rapidly, expanding and locking surrounding tissue in position. This can hold the rib cage outward slightly, a subtle indicator that freezing followed immediately after drinking. The final drink, never digested. In glacial margins, advancing ice can override terrain unexpectedly. Animals moving across seemingly stable ground encounter a sudden shift as meltwater refreezes beneath snow, forming hard crust over soft layers. When the crust breaks, limbs penetrate and cannot withdraw before exposure drains heat rapidly. Snowfall and wind then conceal the body. The glacier does not crush them. It hides them intact. Thousands of years later, melting reveals these remains with astonishing clarity. Hooves retain wear patterns. Claws remain sharp. Even parasites preserved within fur indicate the animal was part of a living ecosystem hours earlier. Nothing suggests long decline. The unsettling effect of frozen fossils is the absence of violence in appearance despite violence in timing. No impact scars, no suffocation sediment, no burn marks. Only life interrupted by a temperature threshold crossed too quickly for adaptation. Where ash steals breath and mud steals movement, cold steals time itself. Eventually, minerals infiltrate and stabilize the tissues permanently, turning them into true fossils. But the essential preservation occurred at the moment freezing began. Everything afterward simply maintained the state already captured. The organism was not reshaped by burial. It was preserved by stillness. Across polar regions and ancient cold intervals, these deposits show how delicate the balance of survival can be. Creatures adapted to seasonal cold still depend on gradual change. When the transition becomes instantaneous, physiology offers no defense. The last winter was not harsher, it was faster. And because it came faster than life could respond, the final positions remain unchanged, waiting beneath ice for ages until exposure returns them to light exactly as they fell. Water normally erases evidence. Because such events often coincide with sediment disturbance, the dying animals sink into soft-bottom mud immediately. Without oxygen, scavengers cannot survive long enough to disturb them. The bodies remain articulated, mouths open wide, gill covers flared, breathing ended where they lived. Trackways on ancient lake margins sometimes lead directly into water with no return prints. At first, this suggests simple entry, but in some cases, bodies lie just offshore beneath thick sediment layers deposited during the same event. The animals did not wander into deep water intentionally. The shoreline vanished beneath them. Flood surges can raise water levels meters within minutes. Fast-moving sediment-laden water pushes inland, overtaking animals unable to outrun the current. Unlike normal floods that carry debris far away, these dense surges slow rapidly once energy dissipates, dropping everything in place. The victims settle where the surge stops. Because burial occurs immediately after drowning, Posture reflects struggle rather than decay. Limbs extend outward, necks stretch upward, and sometimes multiple individuals overlap, each climbing over the other in attempts to stay above rising water. A hierarchy of desperation preserved in stone. Even air-breathing animals show signs of aquatic suffocation. Some fossils reveal soil inside nostrils mixed with aquatic sediment, indicating they attempted to breathe above water while submerged material entered simultaneously. The final breaths pulled in both air and mud. Escape almost succeeded. It transformed. In many deposits, layers above and below the event contain few fossils, indicating normal conditions allowed decay and scavenging. Only the catastrophic layer holds complete bodies. A brief episode of suffocation recorded more life than centuries of stability. A few minutes created a permanent record. These fossils remind us that ancient waters were not always safe refuges. They could shift chemistry, density, and clarity without warning. Creatures adapted to swimming could not adapt to breathing solids. Their last motion was not fleeing land or sky. It was fighting the very element they depended on. Not every drowning leaves a quiet, resting body. Some leave collisions. In several remarkable fossil sites, two animals are preserved, locked together in combat beneath what was once shallow water. A predator grips prey with jaws closed tight, claws embedded in skin, yet neither animal shows signs of decay or separation. They did not die hours apart. They died in the same instant. The water around them turned lethal before the struggle ended. These scenes occur where sediment suddenly floods a water body in overwhelming volume. Rivers in flood stage can carry dense loads of fine particles that pour into lakes or coastal basins as thick plumes. Visibility drops to zero. Breathing structures clog. Panic accelerates movement, stirring even more sediment upward. The entire column becomes a suffocating suspension. The animals continue interacting because the threat is invisible. Predator still hunts, prey still flees, neither aware that oxygen has already fallen below survival threshold. When movement finally stops, the bodies sink only slightly before more particles settle over them. The fight has no conclusion, only interruption. Some fossils preserve fish stacked above one another vertically, mouths open toward the surface. The lowest individuals lie closest to the sediment source, while those higher attempted escape upward. Yet the sediment cloud expanded faster than swimming speed. The final positions mark each animal's last attempt to reach breathable water. A hierarchy of depth recorded in rock. Occasionally, air-breathing animals enter water during catastrophe and perish there. Trackways show running patterns that terminate at ancient shorelines, followed immediately by buried bodies offshore. The animals likely fled, approaching danger from land, only to encounter thickened water they could not cross. They exchanged one hazard for another. In one deposit, hoofed mammals appear clustered at a narrow crossing point, limbs tangled together. The arrangement suggests they gathered at the only accessible passage. But floodwater carrying heavy sediment surged through first, knocking them off balance. The water was not deep enough to swim, yet too dense to stand in. They drowned standing upright. Because burial followed instantly, the skeletons remain articulated and upright relative to the ancient ground surface. Sediment filled spaces around the bodies before gravity could lay them flat. Later compression preserved the posture permanently. Death captured mid-fall. Marine invertebrates also record drowning differently. Some shells are found open with soft tissue impressions still visible. Normally, after death, muscles relax and shells close or separate. Here they remain extended because oxygen depletion prevented muscle relaxation before burial. The last contraction never occurred. Death is quiet and contained. Over time, the resin hardens, then mineralizes into amber. Because the burial medium formed molecule by molecule around the body, details smaller than a grain of dust remain preserved. Individual hairs, compound eye facets, even microscopic parasites remain exactly where they were during the final movement. The fossil is not an outline. It is the organism itself, frozen at cellular scale. Many specimens show clear signs of struggle. Legs extended outward, wings partially torn, mandibles biting at surrounding resin. The posture reveals the sequence of entrapment. Initial contact, panic movement, gradual immobilization. The last effort is permanent. Sometimes multiple creatures share the same piece. One insect trapped first attracts a predator or scavenger. The second lands, touches the surface, and becomes stuck as well. In rare cases, entire chains of interaction appear, each organism responding to the previous one's distress. A miniature ecosystem ends in seconds. One famous example shows a predator grasping prey while both sink into resin. The hunter did not realize the surface was lethal until landing. Its attack continued even as its legs adhered. The prey remains held in its jaws millions of years later. The hunt never resolved. Unlike mud or ash, resin does not crush bodies, it supports them. This allows preservation of soft tissues that normally vanish immediately after death. Internal organs, stomach contents, and even color patterns survive because oxygen never reached them again. Time cannot rearrange what air cannot enter. In some amber pieces, air bubbles trapped near the organism indicate breathing attempts. Tiny spheres align along spiracles, showing the last exhalations before suffocation. These microscopic traces record physiology at the instant life ended. The final breath remains suspended. Resin trapping also captures behavior unrelated to fear. Some insects are preserved mid-feeding, mouthparts inserted into plant tissue. Others remain attached to each other in mating position, unaware of the incoming flow. The moment is preserved not because they reacted too slowly, but because the danger appeared without sensory warning. The environment offered no signal. Even feathers from larger animals appear, detached but perfectly intact. The original owner brushed against resin briefly and escaped, leaving behind a fragment that records structure at near-living accuracy. The resin did not need the entire animal to document its presence. Contact alone was enough. The chemical properties of resin explain this precision. It contains compounds that resist microbial growth and harden gradually without shrinking around the body. Instead of compressing tissues, it stabilizes them in place. Later mineral infiltration strengthens the structure without altering shape. The fossil becomes three-dimensional and lifelike. In some rare specimens, water droplets are preserved alongside the trapped organisms. Rain fell during entrapment, mixing with resin but not dispersing it. The insect died during a specific weather condition that remains visible millions of years later. An entire moment of climate captured in a drop of hardened sap. Unlike catastrophic burial events that affect landscapes, resin deaths are isolated and individual. Yet collectively, they form one of the most detailed archives of ancient life. Thousands of tiny tragedies, each instantaneous, each perfectly recorded. No bones required. Amber reveals that violent preservation does not always mean dramatic force. Sometimes violence lies in inevitability. The organism struggles, but physics prevents escape from the first second. There is no gradual worsening, only the realization too late. Movement stops not from impact or suffocation by mass, but from adhesion. The forest continues around the trapped body, unaware. Days later, the resin fully hardens. Years later, it falls and buries in sediment. Millions of years later, it becomes stone. Inside, the last motion remains unfinished forever. Resin does not always trap alone. Often it flows repeatedly from the same wound in a tree, layering over earlier hardened surfaces. Each new flow captures a different moment, separated by minutes, hours, or days. When these layers solidify together, they preserve a timeline inside a single piece of amber. Events unfold in sequence, permanently stacked. An insect becomes trapped. Time passes. Its body remains exposed but sealed from decay. A new flow covers it, trapping pollen drifting through the air. Another flow later captures a predator drawn to the scent. The final result is not just one death, but a chain of reactions recorded in order, a miniature history of behavior sealed in resin. Some specimens contain dozens of organisms interacting indirectly. Tiny mites cling to a larger insect's body, parasitizing it in life and preserved, still attached in death. Fungal spores float nearby, showing the surrounding environment at that exact moment. Even strands of spider silk extend across the amber, demonstrating that a web existed near the wound. The forest around the tree becomes visible without the tree itself surviving. Unlike mud or ash burial, where position relative to ground matters, resin captures three-dimensional space. Creatures remain suspended at different depths, exactly where they were in air when the flow surrounded them. Orientation reveals whether they walked, crawled, or flew into the trap. Gravity is preserved. In certain pieces, small air currents appear frozen as curved trails of particles leading toward the resin surface. These trails show the final attempts of insects trying to pull free while the fluid thickened around them. The paths end abruptly where motion stops, movement drawn like lines in glass. Some animals escaped partially. Legs or antennae extend beyond the amber's edge, indicating they freed part of their body before the flow sealed. These fragments often show damage where the organism broke itself loose. The remainder stayed behind as the cost of survival. Even escape is recorded. There are cases where water droplets trapped alongside insects contain microorganisms inside the droplet itself. The droplet sealed before evaporation, turning into a microscopic container. Within it, bacteria and algae remain preserved in arrangement as they floated in ancient rainwater. An ecosystem inside a bubble, inside a fossil. One of the most unusual forms of violent preservation in amber involves chemical reactions during entrapment. As certain insects struggle, they release defensive fluids. These substances remain suspended around the body, showing a cloud of chemicals produced during the final seconds. Defense without effect. Because resin hardens from the outside inward, the outer shell forms first, while the interior remains liquid briefly. During this time, the trapped organism may still move slightly, creating subtle distortions in surrounding layers. These distortions map the last motions before immobilization completed. The final seconds stretched and then ended. Amber also preserves sound-producing organs in exact position. Stridulating insects, which create noise by rubbing body parts together, are sometimes caught mid-movement. The alignment of these structures shows the behavior occurring when entrapment began. The animal was not fleeing, it was communicating. Conversation interrupted forever. In rare cases, vertebrate remains appear. Small lizards, feathers attached to skin, or fragments of tails. The resin coated them rapidly enough to prevent collapse. Skin texture remains visible, including scale arrangement and pigmentation patterns. These fossils contain more biological information than most complete skeletons in rock. Soft tissue outlived bone. The stillness inside amber differs from the stillness of ice or ash. Those environments stop movement by overwhelming force. Resin stops movement by increasing resistance gradually until motion is impossible. The animal experiences a brief period where effort changes nothing. Inevitability replaces speed. This creates fossils that feel intimate rather than catastrophic. Instead of herds or landscapes, each piece shows a single life's last action: feeding, mating, hunting, resting, or simply walking across bark. The violence lies not in destruction, but in the impossibility of escape after first contact. A single step becomes permanent. Over millions of years, the hardened resin may be buried, heated, and transformed into amber without disturbing the interior. Later, erosion reveals it intact. Light passing through the material illuminates the organism as if still alive. The past remains transparent. Together, thousands of these preserved moments provide a continuous record of ancient forests more detailed than any skeletal deposit could offer. They reveal daily activity, weather conditions, and interactions across species, all captured by a substance designed only to heal a tree's wound. A tree tried to protect itself. Instead, it created a perfect archive of final movements, each one a silent testimony to how quickly life can change from motion to memory without any dramatic force at all. Some of the most lethal events in Earth's history left no marks on the body at all. No broken bones, no ash coating the skin, no sediment packed in the lungs. Creatures simply fell where they stood. Entire groups collapsed together, preserved in natural postures as if sleep arrived without warning. For a long time, these fossils confused researchers. Why would healthy animals lie down simultaneously with no sign of struggle or injury? Why would predators and prey rest side by side without interaction? The answer was not impact, burial, drowning, or freezing. The answer was air itself. Under certain conditions, the atmosphere near the ground can suddenly become unbreathable while appearing unchanged. Invisible gases released from the earth can displace oxygen silently. Animals inhale normally, but receive nothing usable. The brain shuts down within seconds. They do not fight because they cannot. One type of environment capable of this is volcanic gas release. Even without eruption, magma deep underground emits carbon dioxide and other gases that travel upward through cracks. Because some of these gases are heavier than air, they accumulate in low areas such as valleys or lake basins. The landscape becomes a bowl of suffocation. Animals entering such a zone experience dizziness first. Coordination fails. Within moments, they collapse. If the gas layer persists, every creature that approaches meets the same fate. Eventually, wind covers the bodies with sediment or falling debris, preserving them exactly where they fell. No chase, no escape attempt. Fossil deposits formed this way show remarkable calmness. Limbs folded beneath bodies, heads resting naturally, jaws closed. The absence of distress posture indicates nervous system failure occurred before panic could develop. Death arrived faster than awareness. Stillness is the evidence. Some layers contain animals of different sizes, distributed randomly but confined to a topographic depression. None appear on surrounding higher ground. The pattern suggests a localized, invisible hazard rather than widespread catastrophe. They walked into danger unknowingly. In certain ancient lake regions, chemical reactions in deep water occasionally released large volumes of dissolved gas upward in a sudden overturn. The gas spread across the surface and spilled onto adjacent land. Creatures near the shore inhaled the cloud and collapsed simultaneously. The water did not drown them. It poisoned the air above it. Because such events often occur in calm weather, footprints sometimes lead directly into the area without any change in pace. There is no running pattern, no hesitation marks. The animals sensed nothing unusual before the final step. The last movement appears ordinary. After death, fine sediment slowly settled over the bodies. The lack of scavenging suggests smaller organisms also succumbed to the same atmosphere. With no disturbance, The remains stayed articulated and preserved delicate details. The entire ecosystem paused. In caves, similar preservation occurs when carbon dioxide accumulates in enclosed chambers. Creatures entering the space collapse at different distances from the entrance, depending on tolerance and body height. Fossils found in such arrangements show a gradient of positions, all facing inward. Curiosity became fatal. Even large predators are found among these assemblages. They were drawn by the presence of earlier victims, but were overcome themselves. No feeding marks exist because each arrival experienced the same invisible condition. The hazard persisted long enough to create a chain of death. These fossils differ from those formed by violent burial because there is no sign of movement during the final seconds. Muscles relaxed normally. Bodies did not twist or extend. The brain ceased function before reflexive reactions. Life stopped without struggle. Chemical analysis of surrounding sediments sometimes reveals minerals associated with gas, rich water, or volcanic emissions, confirming the mechanism. Yet the bodies themselves carry almost no indication. Only the collective pattern reveals what happened. Absence becomes data. This type of preservation demonstrates that catastrophic death does not require force. A change in atmospheric composition alone can erase activity instantly. Creatures evolved to detect predators, heat, cold, and ground vibration, but not a shift in oxygen percentage. There was nothing to detect. The result is a fossil record of peaceful postures marking sudden endings. Animals appear resting beside each other regardless of natural behavior, united only by location. The environment created a boundary between safe and lethal, measured in meters. Crossing it ended life. These layers remind us that the planet can alter the simplest requirement for survival without visible warning. Breath becomes useless and motion ceases exactly where it began. The final scene looks calm. Only the number of bodies reveals the violence. Invisible gases do not always act instantly. Sometimes they linger. In low basins or depressions, dense gases can remain trapped for hours or days, especially under still weather conditions. During this time, animals approach gradually, each unaware of what happened to the previous one. The result is not a single simultaneous collapse, but a layered accumulation of victims across a short span of time. The ground becomes a silent boundary between life and suffocation. Fossil sites formed this way often contain bodies at slightly different levels within the same sediment layer. Some lie directly on the original surface, others partially buried by dust that settled between arrivals. The spacing suggests repeated entry into the lethal zone rather than one sudden catastrophe. Curiosity and instinct guided them inward. Herbivores may enter seeking water pooled at the bottom of a depression. Predators follow the scent of unmoving prey. Scavengers arrive last. Each breath contains less oxygen than required, yet no smell or color warns them. Within moments they weaken and collapse beside earlier victims. A chain of deaths forms naturally. In certain deposits, trackways lead into the center from multiple directions. The prints remain normal in stride and depth until the final step. No turning marks appear. The animals did not attempt escape because they never sensed danger until coordination failed. The hazard acted faster than recognition. Birds are sometimes found perched on branches above these sites, preserved after falling directly downward. They did not attempt flight because the loss of consciousness occurred before reaction. Their wings remained folded, claws still curved in gripping posture. They released the branch only when strength ended. The persistence of gas layers also explains mixed species assemblages rarely seen together in life. Creatures with different behaviors, activity times, and diets gather in one place because the environment removed the need for interaction. They simply occupied the same lethal airspace at different moments. Behavior patterns collapse along with bodies. Over time, fine sediment or wind-blown dust covers the area, sealing the remains. Because scavengers entering the zone also perish, disturbance remains minimal. Skeletons stay articulated, often with delicate structures preserved. Death protected the dead. In cave systems, seasonal changes can trap gases near floors during colder periods. Animals seeking shelter inside lie in natural resting positions but never rise again. Later rockfall or sediment accumulation encloses them where they slept. Shelter became enclosure. One particularly telling feature in such deposits is vertical distribution by body height. Smaller animals lie closer to the lowest points, while taller animals collapse slightly higher up slopes. The gas layer had a measurable thickness, and each species reached its tolerance threshold at a different level. The atmosphere formed an invisible surface. Unlike ash or mud, which physically surround the body, toxic air leaves the exterior untouched. Skin impressions, fur outlines, and even footprints beneath the bodies remain pristine because nothing disturbed them at the moment of death. The environment changed without movement. Chemical residues in surrounding minerals often reveal elevated carbon compounds or volcanic signatures. Yet the fossils themselves show calm expressions. Jaws closed, limbs relaxed, spines aligned naturally. Peaceful appearance hides abrupt endings. In rare cases, entire nesting grounds are preserved where adults and young lie together in normal resting arrangements. The group did not attempt escape because the threat provided no stimulus for flight. The community simply ceased activity simultaneously. An ordinary moment became permanent. These deposits demonstrate a different form of violent preservation. Not forceful interruption, but immediate removal of the ability to act. The nervous system requires oxygen to function. Without it, even fear cannot form. Silence precedes awareness. Across geological history, such layers appear wherever gases could accumulate. Volcanic terrains, stagnant lakes, enclosed valleys, and caves. Each represents a short interval when the air itself no longer supported life. The victims did not struggle, they simply stopped. And because nothing disturbed them afterward, the earth preserved their final ordinary postures leaving behind a record of catastrophe defined not by motion but by its sudden absence. All the previous scenes share a pattern: a local disaster, a valley, a forest, a shoreline, a lake, a small piece of the planet changed suddenly and preserved what lived there. But sometimes the same principle operates on a scale so large that it does not erase a habitat. It erases nearly all habitats at once. In the rock record, there are thin layers found across continents that contain something unusual. Beneath them lie abundant fossils. Above them, life changes drastically. Entire groups vanish, replaced by different forms better suited to altered conditions. The layer itself often holds bodies in positions suggesting abrupt death. These are the horizons marking mass extinction events, moments when preservation did not occur in one place, but across the world simultaneously. Unlike gradual environmental change, these boundaries show no transition. One moment ecosystems function normally, the next they collapse. The fossil record becomes a global snapshot of interruption. The cause varies across time, but the effect is consistent. At one boundary, marine creatures appear in dense accumulations. Shells close tightly as though reacting to sudden stress. Microscopic examination shows they died while alive, not after long exposure. The surrounding sediment indicates rapid deposition from disturbed seafloor material. Oceans themselves convulsed. On land, plants are found broken yet not decayed, buried in chaotic mixtures suggesting powerful atmospheric disturbance. Small animals lie in random orientation but remain articulated. They were not scavenged, meaning burial followed immediately after death. The biosphere experienced shock. One of the clearest signals is a thin layer enriched in elements, rare in normal crust, but common in extraterrestrial material. Above this line, many species never appear again. The boundary marks a moment when energy entered the system faster than biological adaptation could respond. The environment changed everywhere at once. In certain regions, fish fossils within this layer contain tiny spheres of melted rock inside their gills. These particles formed in extreme heat high in the atmosphere and fell back to the surface globally. The fish inhaled them while still alive, suffocating as debris rained into the water. The sky itself delivered the fatal material. Elsewhere, tree trunks are preserved, snapped, and aligned in the same direction, indicating a powerful pressure wave passed over the forest. Animals beneath were buried by sediment, mobilized instantly by the disturbance. Air became force. What distinguishes these global events from local disasters is simultaneity across ecosystems. Marine, freshwater, and terrestrial organisms all record the same moment of termination. Predators and prey, large and small, warm-adapted and cold-adapted species, all end at the same boundary. No refuge existed. In some deposits, burrowing animals are preserved inside their tunnels, claws extended upward. They attempted to escape a rapidly changing surface environment, but the change penetrated underground. Even shelter failed. The entire planet participated. Following the initial event, Secondary effects often compounded preservation. Darkness from atmospheric particles halted photosynthesis. Food chains collapsed, but the first deaths happened before starvation began, recorded in posture and articulation. The catastrophe began instantly. The fossil layer representing this moment is thin because the duration was short. Minutes to hours created a boundary millions of years long in geological memory. Above it, recovery ecosystems appear slowly, but below it lies the last day of a previous world. Time compressed into a line. These global preservation events reveal that fossilization is not merely a product of slow burial. Sometimes it results from sudden planetary scale change that halts decay everywhere at once. The same principles seen in mudflows and ashfalls operate, only amplified. Speed outran biology on a global scale. The organisms preserved here did not die knowing the future would change. They died in ordinary activity, their last actions captured not by local accident but by planetary transformation. The Earth recorded its own turning point, and in that record we see not just individual deaths, but the final moments of entire eras. When paleontologists stand at a mass extinction boundary, they are not looking at a gradual transition. They are looking at a horizon that once represented a single terrible day. Below it lies a complete ecosystem: predators, prey, plants, insects, burrowers, swimmers, flyers. Above it lies a different one, assembled slowly over thousands of years. The dividing line between them is often thinner than a finger. That thinness is the most important clue. If the change had taken centuries, scavengers and weather would blur the record. Bodies would decay in stages. Instead, many organisms within the boundary layer remain articulated and undisturbed. Some lie with limbs extended in motion, others are curled where they collapsed. There is no time gap separating their deaths. The planet changed faster than decomposition. At several sites, fish appear packed tightly together with debris from land plants mixed into the same layer. Rivers and oceans experienced violent agitation simultaneously. Water surged inland while material from land washed outward. Habitats merged under chaotic movement before settling again. Every environment moved at once. Microscopic grains embedded in the sediment show signs of having been molten during flight through the atmosphere. They cooled as they fell back to the surface worldwide. Many animals inhaled these particles, and the grains remain inside respiratory structures. They died during the event itself, not afterward. Breathing ended while debris still fell from the sky. Large land animals also record the moment in posture. Some appear to have been running, bodies angled forward, hind limbs pushing off ground preserved beneath them. Others shelter beside obstacles as if reacting to sudden pressure or sound. None display long-term injury or starvation signs. The final actions lasted seconds. Plant life contributes another detail. Leaves within the boundary are often torn and compressed into dense mats, indicating a powerful atmospheric disturbance stripped vegetation rapidly. Yet delicate leaf veins remain visible, meaning burial followed immediately after damage. Destruction and preservation occurred together. In coastal regions, marine shells lie closed tightly. Many species open after death as muscles relax, but here they remain sealed. The animals experienced lethal stress before burial, their final contraction preserved permanently. Even the smallest organisms reacted. One of the clearest patterns is the absence of scavenging traces. Normally, carcasses attract feeding within hours. In this layer, teeth marks and burrows are rare or absent. Whatever happened affected scavengers equally, preventing disturbance long enough for sediment to seal the remains. Nothing arrived afterward to rearrange the scene. After the boundary, life returns slowly. The layers above contain fewer species, smaller individuals, and simpler ecosystems. Recovery takes thousands of years. But the moment of collapse remains a single event preserved across continents, a global still frame in Earth's history. These fossils differ emotionally from others. Mud flows show local tragedy. Ashfall shows suffocation under darkened skies. Frozen bodies show sudden climate shift. Amber shows individual entrapment. But extinction layers show the end of familiarity itself. Not a place, but a world. Stop. The creatures preserved there were not adapted to failure. They were adapted to the environment that existed the day before. Their behaviors continued normally until conditions exceeded biological limits everywhere at once. Instinct had no answer. The boundary therefore represents more than death. It marks a reset point where the rules changed abruptly. Evolution after this moment built on survivors shaped by chance rather than superiority. The fossil layer is the dividing line between past and future ecosystems. Every perfectly preserved body within it shares the same story as those in landslides, ash clouds, freezing storms, drowning waters, resin flows, and poisoned valleys. The environment altered faster than life could respond. Decay never began. Motion ended mid-action. Speed created memory. Across geological time, these events remind us that the fossil record is not merely a slow archive of gradual change. It is punctuated by instants when the planet recorded its own violence with extraordinary precision. Each preserved organism is a witness that never finished its last movement. And millions of years later, we read those unfinished movements in stone, understanding that the past was not always quiet. Sometimes it ended in a single moment that never faded.